We tend to think of laws as just words on a page, right? But have you ever stopped to wonder how a judge actually turns those words into a decision that can completely change someone's life? Turns out, it's not nearly as simple as just reading a sentence. So let's pull back the curtain and explore the hidden toolkit judges use to figure out what a law really means.
Let's start with a simple question. Is a wheelchair a vehicle? Seems easy enough, but hang on a second. If there's a sign that says no vehicles in the park, does that mean a wheelchair isn't allowed? Whatever you just answered, you've already stepped right into the middle of a huge legal debate.
And this isn't just some academic puzzle. See, this is Osman's reality. He relies on his electronic wheelchair to get around. One day, he's in a local park, and the next thing you know, he's in court, accused of violating that no vehicles rule. I mean, his ability to just enjoy a public park is suddenly on the line. Okay, so if you're the judge in this case, where do you even start? Well, the most obvious place, the first stop, is just the words themselves. Let's take a look at what happens when you decide to take the law at its absolute face value. And that brings us to the first tool in the judge's toolkit, the literal approach. The idea here is super straightforward. The law is what the text says it is. Period. A judge's job isn't to be a mind reader, it's just to be a reader. You just apply the plain, ordinary dictionary definition of the words. And believe me, this isn't some new idea. This quote, from all the way back in 1844, shows you just how deep these roots go. The logic is pretty solid, right? If the words are clear and precise, why would a judge need to do anything else but apply them? The words are seen as the purest form of the law.
And you can see the appeal, can't you? On one hand, it respects the role of government. Judges interpret, they don't make laws. Plus, you and I should be able to read a law and know what it means without guessing some hidden secret. But, and this is a big but, what happens when following those words to the letter leads to a result that just feels completely wrong or even totally absurd?
This old case is a perfect example of the problem. The law literally said you had to take an oath on the true faith of a Christian. Now, everyone kind of knew the point was just ceremonial, not to actually exclude Jewish people, but the court said, hey, the words are the words. And just like that, a democratically elected official was barred from taking his seat. So if we apply that same strict, literal logic to Asman's case, the conclusion is pretty brutal. The law defines a vehicle as a machine with wheels. His wheelchair is a machine with wheels. The text is clear. So verdict? Guilty. Case closed. Yeah, that probably doesn't feel right, does it? And it doesn't always sit right with judges either. That's exactly why they have other tools in their kit, tools that let them look beyond just the words on the page. Which brings us to a totally different way of thinking, the subjective approach. With this one, the judge basically becomes a detective. They're not just reading the words on the page, they're trying to get inside the minds of the people who actually wrote the law. What did they really intend to happen? It's this imaginative reconstruction, trying to figure out what those long-gone lawmakers would have thought about a situation they never even dreamed of. Here's a great example of this in action. There is this old law giving the government a monopoly on telegraphs. Then boom, the telephone gets invented. Now, literally speaking, a telephone is not a telegraph. They're different things. But the court looked back and said, okay, what did the lawmakers intend? They figured the whole point was to control new ways of sending messages. So yeah, they decided the lawmakers would have wanted the telephone to be included. Now, a close cousin to that is something called the purposive approach. Instead of trying to psychoanalyze individual lawmakers from the past, this one asks a much bigger question. What was the purpose of this law? What problem in society was it trying to fix? The judge's job is to figure that out and then interpret the words in whatever way best helps achieve that original purpose. Okay, check out this case from India. It really shows how this works. So there was a law to give land to landless persons. Now, technically, a super rich businessman who lives in the city but doesn't own land is a landless person, right? But the court zoomed out. They asked, what was the purpose of this law? And it was obvious. It was meant to help poor agricultural workers, not rich city dwellers. So even though the words fit, the purpose didn't. The businessman was out. And for Osman? Wow, this approach changes everything. If we look at the law's preamble, it says the whole point is to organize vehicle circulation. So let's ask the question, was this law written to solve a problem with wheelchairs creating traffic jams in parks? Of course not. It was about cars and trucks. Osman's wheelchair has nothing to do with that. So using this purposive approach, he's clearly not guilty. Okay, but we can zoom out even further. Sometimes a judge has to look beyond just this one law and think about, well, the values of the entire legal system. And this is our widest lens yet, the teleological approach. This approach connects the dots between the specific words of one little law and the biggest, most important principles of the whole legal system. Things like the Constitution, fundamental rights, equality, the big stuff. So the judge is standing at a fork in the road. One interpretation of the word vehicle punishes Osman. The other lets him use the park. This approach says the judge must choose the path that best promotes those higher values: fairness, equality, all the things the Constitution stands for. And when you apply this to Osman's case, the verdict becomes crystal clear. The Constitution doesn't just allow, it promotes special provisions for disabled persons. It champions equality. So to take some minor park rule and use it to punish him, that would completely violate those much higher constitutional values. It's a no-brainer. Verdict? Not guilty.
So hold on. We've just looked at a few different ways to read the law, and they gave us completely different answers for Osman. Which brings us to the biggest question of all.
So which one is the right one? Well, the answer is kind of surprising. It's all of them. This is a concept called interpretive pluralism. Think of it like a toolkit. A judge has all of these methods, and they choose the right tool for the right job depending on the case. So let's just quickly put it all together. Look at how much the judge's choice matters here. The literal approach, focusing only on the plain text, finds Osman guilty. But the second the judge decides to look a little wider, at the original intent, or the law's purpose, or the country's core values, the verdict completely flips. Guilty becomes not guilty. It just goes to show you the method a judge chooses has incredible power. And that's really the key takeaway here. The law isn't a piece of code where you just punch in the facts and get one correct answer. It's a dynamic human process of interpretation. And the decision of which lens to use, well, that can change a person's life. And that brings us right back to you. So we've seen the toolkit. We understand what's at stake. We now know that reading the law is not passive, it's an active choice. So now I'm putting you in the judge's seat. You have the facts of Osman's case in front of you. What choice do you make?